couple days ago, I put a call out in a Facebook group, and it said, "Help! I'm doing a TEDx talk about ADHD, and I have to memorize it, but I have ADHD." So, about 173 kind strangers reached out and gave me tips and advice, but the most common thing that they said was, memorization is ableist, and you have ADHD. Take your notes, woman. So they're here. I'm also like overconfident, so watch this. We're all in this together. I've had an interesting life, and by most metrics, a successful one. I've got great relationships, a loving family, I've traveled, I've earned 3 degrees, I own a successful business. I relate well to people, and I know I come across as an extremely confident person. And I am confident. I know that there are things in life that come easily to me. A big part of this is privilege. Another big part is that I was raised by feminist parents who, when I asked, "Do you think that I could do X?" invariably answered, "Of course you can." On the other hand, there have always been things, easy things that anybody can do that I can't. This list includes, but is not limited to, knowing what food items we need from the grocery store and procuring those items. Walking through doorways without forgetting where I'm going and why. Or sitting through a boring math class or a staff meeting without the overwhelming urge to rip out my eyeballs, fling them at the speaker, and run from the room. So last year, at the age of 39, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I've learned a lot since then. The main thing that I've learned is that we're wrong about ADHD. And I was actually just told about 20 minutes ago that it's not real. So I'm really happy that I'm here telling you about this today. It's a really real thing in my life. So if I'm sounding a bit emotional, that's why. So, sorry. The first problem with ADHD is the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People with ADHD don't have a deficit of attention. We have too much attention and less ability to control it. Our minds are different. We have naturally lower levels of dopamine, and our brains are always on the hunt for more. My favorite ADHD-related story, and by favorite, I mean most ridiculous, happened just near here. My husband, angel that he is, devised a plan in which we would color code our family's Lego. He loves, I know, laugh. He loves a plastic tub, and he found the perfect 35-liter tub to execute his plan. So when we were almost done the project, we realized we were one short, so I was like, I'll go get one. We went to the shop, I got the 35-liter tub, my son and I came straight home, right? So later that night, my son Henry, I asked him to go out into the trunk of the car and find the tub. And I don't know if you've ever seen a 35-liter tub, but it's massive, okay? So you need 2 hands to carry a 35-liter tub. It's like if you took like a liter of milk and multiplied it by 35, yeah? So Henry comes back in and he's like, there's no tub in the car. Did I believe him? No, I didn't. I went to look and there was no 35-liter tub in the car. That's fine, I thought. This kind of thing happens to me all the time. I'll just go back. I've obviously just forgotten it at the shop. So the next day, I drove back to the shop, and as luck would have it, the same man was working. And I explained what happened, and he's like, no problem. I just have to check the security footage so that I can give the timestamp to my boss so that I can explain why I've given you this tub. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So he goes, and he was gone for a while, and he came back, and he was really looking embarrassed. And he said, I'm sorry. We have footage of you leaving, carrying the tub. So to be clear, I lost a 35-liter tub between the door of the shop and the car, okay? So this is one of the ways that ADHD affects me. And this is funny, but living a life in which you are trying so hard not to make mistakes and mess up times and get things wrong is exhausting. I've always been a reader and a writer. I've got an honors degree in English and a master's degree in education. These are facts about me. Another fact about me is that I cried over my math homework almost every night as a kid. I never learned my times tables, and in fact, I failed math in grade 12. My mom was a principal, and my parents were both very supportive, and when I needed to remember something, my mom found a way to help me do it. So multiple choice tests were an exquisite nightmare, but I've always been able to see connections in literature. Another thing that really helped me is an ability to kind of look at a job that needs to be done and decide exactly how much work I need to do to get the result that I want. And then I will do that much work and no more. So in other words, I had strategies that allowed me to be successful, particularly in postgraduate education. When I finished university, I went to teachers college and I became an English teacher. And I've taught lots of kids with ADHD. And I was always really happy to support them in whatever way they needed. The problem is, when I was teaching, my understanding of ADHD was so limited, right? My teacher training taught me that students with ADHD might need to have information chunked so that they can understand it, that they might be, it might take them longer to do things, or they might be hyper. So to give them breaks or let them go for walks or let them play with a fidget toy, right? That if they took medication, they'd be able to focus like a normal student. But the thing is, ADHD is not just about focus. It's about our ability to regulate our brain so that we can get things done. This is a skill called executive function. And what I didn't realize is that those kids that I was teaching, because of their ADHD, they may have been overwhelmed and underwhelmed, overstimulated and understimulated. Their working memory might have been affected. They may have been super sensitive to criticism and rejection. They may have had trouble starting, finishing, and organizing tasks. All of these things are things that we do with our executive function. We all have difficulties with executive function, but those difficulties are much more numerous and more severe in people with ADHD. The other thing I learned is about 5 to 8% of the Australian population has ADHD. That's about 814,500 people. We do not grow out of it, and yet only about 1 in 10 adults with ADHD are getting treatment. Doctors Edward Hallowell and John Ratey are ADHD experts. Their book, ADHD 2.0, contains all of the latest and most cutting-edge research into ADHD. And here's how they define it. ADHD is a term that describes a way of being in the world. It's neither entirely an asset nor a disorder. It is an array of traits specific to a unique kind of mind. It can either become a distinct advantage or an abiding curse, depending on how it's managed. It's an array of traits specific to a unique kind of mind. And it's a real thing. My diagnosis happened completely by accident, and it was momentous. I had an appointment. I made an appointment with my brother's friend, who is not my brother's friend, my friend's brother, who's a GP. So I had had stomach problems for the last 10 years. In our first appointment, I explained my stomach problems. I told him about the anxiety that I was diagnosed with after having kids. And he said to me, "Can you describe it? Can you describe the anxiety?" And I said, "I get really overwhelmed and overstimulated." And so after a comprehensive assessment, which lasted a lot longer than 10 minutes, I finally blurted out, "Do you think I have ADHD or something?" And he sent me a diagnostic test. Guys, I got like a really high score. So, thank you. So then he referred me to a psychiatrist, and in his report, it said, Martha got 5 out of 6 on part A and 10 out of 12 on part B, and she missed one question altogether. I address privilege whenever I tell this story. I had access to a brilliant doctor who looked at my health holistically and understood me and listened to me and was empathetic. Then he referred me to a psychiatrist who understood ADHD in women. And he made sure that I got in to see that psychiatrist in a timely manner. And he still checks in on me to make sure that I'm doing okay. And I acknowledge that this is not everyone's experience with doctors. The difficulty is a lot of the misconceptions that a lot of us have about ADHD, doctors can have them too, right? And ADHD presents differently in everyone, and there's even bigger differences in the way that ADHD presents in women and girls. So just a really quick primer, there are 3 types of ADHD: ADHD inattentive type, ADHD hyperactive type, and ADHD combined type. I have combined type, which means that I show lots of symptoms, traits, of hyperactivity and inattention. ADD is not a thing. It has been removed from the diagnostic manual, so we're ADHD only zone, right? So one of the things about ADHD in women and girls is that the hyperactivity can present very differently. So it's much less likely to be in the body and much more likely to be in the mind. Our central nervous systems are more likely to be affected. So this looks like headaches and stomach aches and sleeplessness and anxiety. And young girls, because of the behavioral and societal standards that are placed on them at such a young age, they just mask them. They just mask these problems and hide them. We mask our symptoms out of shame, and we come up with strategies to work around them. And those strategies work until they don't, right? So a lot of women are diagnosed, like I was, with ADHD after they have kids. So after I had children, the demands placed on me exceeded my ability to work around them. And my doctor at the time said, you know, when your strategies stop working and things fall apart, it's distressing. But there are so many things we can do for you. So, like, I wasn't a bad adult or a bad woman. Or a bad mother. It wasn't just a matter of trying harder. This explained everything. Underdiagnosis of ADHD in women is a feminist issue for lots of reasons. Outrageously, women were not even included in ADHD studies until the late 1990s. And it was 2002 before we had our own long-term study. I tried to look up like celebrities that were born in 2002, and I didn't even know any of them. So like, this is what I'm saying. It was like yesterday, basically. So this lack of diagnosis and this lack of research affects families and communities and businesses in a big way. I'm lucky because I had a lovely childhood. I always knew I was rad. There were definitely things that I wasn't rad at, and there still are. But because of the support and the love and understanding that I got from my parents, those feelings that I still feel every day of shame, of feeling like I'm not good enough, and of feeling like I'm a burden could have become debilitating. And they do for lots of people with ADHD. Having said all that, this is a happy story. I am thrilled now that I know that I have ADHD. When my son, Henry, was diagnosed with ADHD last year, we made a cake to celebrate. Because those easy things that we struggle with, they're juxtaposed with magic and a unique ability to do hard things. Those paradoxical tendencies are what makes ADHD so complex. So my inability to focus is offset by periods of intense hyperfocus. The fact that I lose interest in things easily has transformed into entrepreneurialism. And I might struggle to start tasks sometimes, but I can also knock off a week's worth of work in an afternoon. So I'm not going to tell you all of the famous geniuses that have ADHD, but given the stats, there are about 10 of us in the room right now. ADHD brains and the humans attached to them can be frustrating for neurotypical people. But if you have access to one of these brains, you have access to a special gift. Ask them what they're good at. Don't freak out when they lose a 35-liter tub. And if you have a hard thing that needs doing, get them on board. Thank you.